Last time on Local Perspectives.
Little
animal.
2.
Snuggle. Basically was like, we're going to give you one more. You can move us to one more place, but that's it. We're not moving anymore. Okay. And that place just happened to be St. Augustine. But that being said, I think there are artists out there that are doing things to kind of reshape what rock can be, which is going to kind of give it like some sort of a rebirth, you know? Like the best way to move forward is to not necessarily hold on to like some of the old ideals, even if like there's some value in that. Anyone who seems to be involved with creativity in this town like wants to connect and do things. Maybe it's like a civic pride thing. Like we want to all live in a place that like we can all be proud of, and that people visiting can see something special in.
Right.
And I think the arts and creativity like play like a big part in that. Like you know, you think about places like Charleston and Savannah, and in some ways St. Augustine is like a little brother like to those places. But there's like this hunger too to be seen on the same level of like, you know, if you're talking about like the most unique southern cities, like St. Augustine wants to be on that short list. And for those of us who live here, like we are, we know like this place is unique and special. But a lot of the arts and the creativity, and that doesn't even necessarily mean like just music or just photography or just film. I mean, like the food industry here, you know, they might say they're more craftsmen than they are artists. But there's just so much happening that's interesting, and there's a lot of cross-pollination. Yeah. And all it does is just enrich the experience of life here and make us all just have something unique. Yeah,
it's a really beautiful vantage point to be like in the trenches, so to speak, as a resident, and to be able to see a lot of that. Yeah. And then when people visit and like take the time to do some of the maybe not so touristy things, but some of the more like things that cater to locals, I think they can kind of pick up on that pretty quickly. And I love that desire to do something for the sake of doing it, and not, like you said, not for like the recognition, but like let's just get the idea out there and not tether ourselves to all these like pressures and expectations, and like just kind of let it happen. And then sometimes some of the, you know, coolest, like biggest things are born out of those spontaneous, like no excuses kind of things.
Exactly.
And when you talked about kind of the cross-pollination, it made me think of your photography. Okay. You know, because sure. like you have like business management, you have an artistic, creative sensibility, and then I really enjoy like your food photography, like the creative stuff you do with the pops from the hippo, and then like maybe like chocolate or coconut shavings or different things. It's just like different textures. Is pretty cool.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. How did you find yourself in the photography field?
Sure. So sometime around 2008, I decided to go back to school. And this all kind of ties together, because what I did was I was like, all right, I'm going to go to culinary school. Like I've always loved cooking. I've always had an interest in food and preparing it. So let me go to culinary school. And I was at the Art Institute of Atlanta is where I went. Nice. But the thing is, I dropped out of culinary school after a week, because I would see people like with their cameras, like from like the video department. And it was just like, there was kind of like this ache and this longing of like, why am I not doing that? And when you have those questions and you're doing another thing, it's kind of like, okay, well, it's time to set this aside. And if you feel that strongly about it, like challenge yourself and see what you can do with it. But then I've always been fascinated with cameras. Like when I was a teenager, I would do stuff with like some of the local TV stations. Like, you know, like we had friends who we went to church with that did a lot of that work. And so they would bring me out on projects and things like that. Summer camps, when I'd go visit my dad, like the, you know, public access station would have like summer camps to teach kids about broadcasting. So like that was a part of like my growing up. But yeah, so at the Art Institute, I saw the cameras and thought like, I really should be doing that. And I switched courses and stuff. And was like very fortunate to also know people in Atlanta who, you know, I wouldn't say like they did anything like super notable, but like there was like an independent film scene there, and I got to be like a part of that.
Nice.
But with photography and how all this relates to that is that a lot of my favorite filmmakers like had a background in photography. Like one of my favorite anecdotes is Stanley Kubrick, the famous director. He was actually a photographer before he was a filmmaker, and he had actually made a name for himself in New York as a photographer. So one of the reasons why his films look so gorgeous is because you know, he would collaborate with cinematographers, but the man knew how to frame and photograph something. And so he would even early on get into arguments with his cinematographers because they would just assume he didn't know what he was doing. But he really knew what he was doing, you know? So in an effort to improve my camera skills, you know, because even though they're different mediums, cameras essentially work the same way. It's all about like shutters and lighting and all that stuff. So I just thought, I want my cinematography to be really good, so let me start taking photographs. And it was just one of those weird turns where I started getting more offers to do photography than video. And it was just that sense of, okay, again, something is trying to tell me something here, so let's just embrace that and go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a friend last night who has been overseas for like 6 months doing some Bible education work, and he's kind of at a point where it's like, okay, I told myself I'd do this for 6 months, and now like what's my next move? I don't know. And we were just talking about how a lot of times the thing that you want so badly might turn out maybe not to be the best thing, and then like this thing comes out of left field and you're like, this isn't really what I was thinking of, but let me just go down this road. And it turned out to, you know, 20 years later, you're like, yeah, this is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. But it's just, it's funny how that can, those turns that can take. So no big deal if the answer to this is no, but I always feel like it gives interesting insight. Do you have any morning rituals?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not a super exciting one, but making my bed every day. It sets the tone. It makes me, I'm kind of like a fussy, organized person. I like things to be a very specific way. And doing that just kind of helps like ease my mind, to be honest. Knowing that things have like an order and structure and like my most personal space, like the bedroom, right? Walking away every morning and knowing that the bed is made, that it looks nice and everything is clean and just everything is in like the right place that it needs to be. That for sure is kind of like, I would say, my biggest one.
I can totally understand that. It's like you've already accomplished something for the day, and life is so out of control. There's so many things that we can't manipulate and manage. So like it's understandable that you would treasure like whatever it is that you can kind of like, this is my space and I can like set it up the way I want and just kind of know that when I get home it's going to be the way I left it, kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly.
I on the other hand, like I'm a Dr. Oz kind of like aficionado for whatever reason, and he said something about like, I was like, actually, if you don't make your bed, you know, like it can like air out more, and it's like it's less likely that certain bacteria will grow and this and that. And I was like, okay, I'm not making my bed.
Yeah,
like,
nice.
It's just like, so, you know, what a cop out, because like there are a lot of like that's like such an integral part of like training, like, you know, a lot of like institutional experiences people have had growing up, whether it's like boarding school or military background, all these things, like you make that bed like before you leave for breakfast. That bed needs to be made. It's not a suggestion, it's a requirement. So it's like, I think it's a good sign of character to win the morning, you know, however somebody does that. So describe your ideal like old city adventure. I know this can take a lot of turns, but is there like a quintessential St. Augustine day if you had like nothing to do but like sightsee, for example, and like get your favorite meal?
Absolutely. A lot of it would probably revolve around being downtown, for sure. Although let's backtrack a little bit. I do love the beach for sure. To the point where when I was a kid, I would get like, cause we moved away from the beach, whenever we moved out of St. Augustine when I was a kid. And I would just get like these like weird longings, like as like a child, just like aching for the ocean, and I just miss the connection there. So yeah, the ideal day probably involves like at least like a couple hours like at the beach in the morning, like a lot of people. It's just, it's a great part of living here, just being on the coast. It contributes to like the vibe of the town. But yeah, I love like walking around downtown, but like really long walks, you know, like not just kind of like a casual stroll. Obviously there would be friends there for sure. One of sadly the restaurant doesn't exist anymore. But one of my favorite things to do would be to go to Small Plates, which the people who own Catch 27, it was one of their other ventures. And they had like this great patio. And some of my friends and I, we would just sit there, and of course, like they would do like buy one get one free wine, which is always really appealing in the afternoon. But we would just get like plates of food just to share, like for the table, and we would just sit outside on the patio, just like people watching. And those are some of my fondest memories. And so like my ideal day like has a lot of that sort of thing, a lot of just walking. Even like I really love the Greek Orthodox shrine downtown, the St. Photios shrine. I think I pronounced that the right way. Even just taking a few minutes to pop in there and just be reminded of things that are much larger than we are as people. Plus, like it's just the craziest thing because it's right off of St. George. But when you step back there, it's like being like in another world. Like it's just so quiet and like there's this calm. So even having like a reflective moment before just kind of indulging in too much food and maybe a little too much wine, you know. But yeah, like something downtown with friends where we're eating and drinking a little bit and just sharing life, talking about creative ideas, like people watching, just enjoying like the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's like a timeless enrichment. Can't go wrong. Good food with good friends. Yeah, invariably, anytime we have company, it's like, we need to take you downtown.
Right, exactly.
And it just hasn't lost its luster. Like, it's been 14 years for me, and it just never loses that charm and that, like, otherworldliness. That helps you kind of recalibrate a little bit. And it's nice. I appreciate what you said about the long walks, because we don't always have that luxury, but it's, when you can, I think it's really important to just kind of give yourself permission not to worry about time as much and just go out there and exist. And when you're, you know, not having to rush kind of thing. I'm
actually about to move downtown, which I'm super excited about. That is really exciting. Like,
that's like the like pinnacle, in my opinion, of like, if you're going to live in St. Augustine, you might as well live in the heart of it. Yeah.
And so there's an opportunity there to like try to live like the best day, like most days.
Oh, that's awesome. It's so cool. It can just like, I'm just imagining all like the potential of like just walking to certain places without even having to get in your car and stuff. So you spent time in Quebec recently. Like I think it was late last year in the fall.
It was.
What does it feel like after an experience like that to come back to Florida, to St. Augustine, and like what impact does it have on your viewpoint to be temporarily in such a different place? Do you feel like home seems smaller, or it seems like more time has gone by than actually did?
Sure.
What kind of thoughts go through your head when you like get off the plane?
Well, it was a really interesting contrast for sure. For anyone who hasn't been to Quebec City, like it's very much, it's different, but it's of a spirit with St. Augustine in that it's bigger for sure, but it's more French in design than Spanish. So it's like a larger French version of St. Augustine, and you know, like St. George here is kind of like the main drag for downtown, and like there were like multiple St. George streets in the historic section of Quebec. It definitely kind of made me appreciate like what St. Augustine is and has. And St. Augustine definitely felt a little bit smaller. But that's okay. You know, the first time I went to Los Angeles and came back to Atlanta felt small. You know,
everything's relative.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that, I don't know, like that kind of makes it like more precious in a certain sense. Because of the smallness, I guess. But I really love the contrast between the two places, because there was a definitive familiarity, being like maybe among like the few places in North America that feel very European. You could probably throw Montreal on the top of that list, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, just excuse me, this pocket of just European influence, like in the heart of like Northeast Florida, which is still very country, like in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I don't know. It's just like this gem, and yeah, going to Quebec made me appreciate that. And much like St. Augustine, Quebec City is a very much a good walking city. You can pretty much kind of walk to everywhere you need to be.
Yeah.
And it's nice.
Yeah, I think there are definitely advantages to the small town feel that St. Augustine has kind of retained over the years, even though it's definitely trending right now. And I guess coming from like half Brooklyn, half suburbs of Long Island, I learned something about myself moving here, that I'm much more adaptable than I thought. Like I thought I was going to be miserable here and all this stuff. And like, it was just a really hard time to leave. Like I was fresh out of high school. But I've found so much solace in this like small town feel, and like I'm resistant to that changing. Right. And so like, when I lived in New York, I lived in the shadow of what is often described as like the biggest, greatest city in the world. And, I would go once in a while and then look forward to going home. It wasn't like, it wasn't like it drew me like, oh, I never want to leave. I was like, I've had my fill. It's like sensory overload. It's a lot. And like, I find myself now just wanting to like do as many conservation trails and hikes in the area as possible. And like, I took a trip to North Carolina recently for like 36 hours with a friend just to go hiking, and it was worth it. Like, I was like, just need to kind of like get some elevation and some like lower humidity, get in the mountains, and then so I always find that interesting. There's like a really rewarding kind of like triumphant feeling. It seems like, of coming back from a trip, whether it's out of state or out of the country, and I feel like you come home with more appreciation. Just for the unique personality of home.
And one more thought, if I may. The other thing that's nice is St. Augustine doesn't feel like a place you have to escape from. It feels like a place that like, because some places that people live, or even like I've lived myself, like the idea of travel, and part of the appeal and why that was so exciting was it's like, oh, I get to leave this place that I don't enjoy very much. And I think that's something that's unique about St. Augustine, is it's not a place that people want to escape from. It's a base that you can go out and experience other things, but like, I don't meet too many people that live here that are trying to get out of St. Augustine.
That is a really good point, because there are like communities not far away where that is so much the case, where you're like, I can't wait to get out of this town and go to the Midwest or out, whatever it is. But this is like, there's like a magnetic force, where even like, if someone didn't care for it initially because they were like dragged here as kids on a camping trip, the next thing you know, like they live here and they're raising their family here. So there's definitely something to it. Just kind of like a callback to like simplicity, I think, maybe. Yeah. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Hippo Coffee Bar, at least a little bit. Sure. With the 1 year anniversary, like literally being today. Yeah. How did the rebranding of that store come to pass? We had basically gotten to a point where, so it used to be the Hippo Cafe, and that building that the cafe is part of has always been a mixed use facility, of course. That's where the pops for every Hippo store was in the back of house for the cafe. And of course the cafe was like, they sold the pops, but it was kind of more about like the sandwiches and things like that they used to make. But then the problem with that space was that like people would come in, even like local people, and they would think that was the only Hippo thing that was even in existence, right? Because unfortunately, like a lot of locals don't really like to go downtown, which I think is a shame. Like anyone who lives there kind of understands sometimes because of like the parking and the traffic and stuff. So yeah, I think like there are things that happen downtown that are actually having like a more local and even regional impact, but people miss out on sometimes. So with the cafe, people would come to it and just assume that's all it was. In the meanwhile, the Hippo, we had expanded to like 11 shops like across Florida,
and we were from St. Augustine.
Yeah.
And like that's a real point of pride.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, to have that growth and to be that kind of a company from a place like St. Augustine. And so it was definitely controversial because people really loved the sandwiches. And we heard a whole lot about how much, even to this day, like people come in daily and like they just maybe haven't been in a while or forgot or something, but they're always surprised to hear that we don't do the sandwiches anymore. So the remodel was there and the rebranding was there to point people to the broader picture of what we were doing. Hey, we're from here. We're one of you, like, but look at what we're doing across the state, and like we're from here, like celebrate this with us,
definitely.
Take pride in this with us. So yeah, I would say like it was just a philosophical change more than anything else, just to try to point to the broader growth of like the Hippo.
Yeah, I have a lot of good memories of the Tree Boulevard store, like doing like a soup and a sandwich and a pop and just hanging with a friend there. Yeah. But I feel like to your credit, to like the rebranding's credit and like philosophical change, like you think of a place like Trader Joe's,
right?
And people love Trader Joe's so much. It's like an experience, and the people are so nice, and you just want to go, like even if you have to drive 45 minutes to get there. Yeah. And there are people who say like, "Oh, you took my favorite thing like off the shelf. Why?" But they keep coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think in a similar fashion, you guys, I'm sure the community is going to go along for the ride, and they already have. There's been like, I remember when Matt Armstrong performed there. That was like such a big deal to me because like I've known him for a while, and like we went to school together in the past, and he's the easiest person to run into in town. Like whether it's like Cafe 11 at like a local concert or whatever. Especially Kookaburra, like on Cathedral Place, because when he was working at the government house, it was a short walk away. But knowing that he was a musician, and it took, I think it was like a good 12, 13 years after meeting him that I finally got to see him play at the Hippo Coffee Bar. So I was like stoked. And so many people came out for that. Yeah. Because there are a lot of people in the community that are just really loved and known. And like when they do something like that, people are going to come out.
It's the best.
Droves. And then like you have like the movie nights, and then today is like going to be a big celebration. So I'm sure people will be understanding and flexible that like, hey, look, maybe we don't have this exact item anymore, but look at everything else that's going on. Like you said, come along for the ride. Like you won't be disappointed.
Indeed. Really cool. I mean, there's even been some like kind of acquiescence to like demand. Like we've brought back some savory items recently with like empanadas and quiches and things like that. I can't wait to try
one of those. I saw that last time I was in there. I was like, no way.
Yeah.
I love empanadas.
So we are working on those things just to meet some of that demand. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that I kind of failed to mention earlier was that the other, because there are other like components to the rebrand. It's not just like making it about coffee and pops, but you mentioned music and like the movie nights that we do. And the other side of it was like we wanted to turn it into like a community center of sorts, like where we were doing things for people to come out and experience like music or film and like have some place to go to where they can get like a good cup of coffee and a nice pop, but then like take their time, enjoy what we're doing that evening, because it's always free, and we would never charge for people to come in for those things because we want it to be a service to the community. And 1 year later, what's been really amazing is that like, frankly, it's just reflected in our numbers. We are at a point now where people are starting to accept us, not for what we used to be, but what we're currently doing, and that's very crucial. I can tell you like what it was like a year ago when we first opened up, and it was like, wow, that's kind of all we did today. Like that's something. So now, not to go too deep into the business, but like, it's reflected in the numbers, and like we're seeing people accept it and respond to it, and it's really encouraging when you've worked so hard on something.
Absolutely.
And like you're finally seeing people take it for what it is.
And really like when you describe like your ideal day in St. Augustine, I feel like you and your colleagues are curating a similar experience. It's like you know what I mean? It perpetuates itself. It's like if I enjoy sitting and enjoy like having time with friends and enjoying a meal and sipping wine and just letting time pass and bouncing enriching ideas, creative ideas off each other, like why not try to play a role in creating a space similar to that for other people to enjoy. And I think that's probably one of the things that would have entice people because we have so many creatives in this town, and to be in a setting like that where the arts and film are incorporated, and kind of you never know. It's like someone could probably tell a story later on that like, yeah, I was sitting at the Hippo and like we got this great idea. The three of us were sitting there, and the next thing you know, like we're like, all right, let's go for it, and whatever it is, you know. And so like I'm excited for where things have gone and like the trajectory, and like with the expanded hours, I'm definitely gonna try to park myself over there more frequently.
I hope so. Yeah. It's always nice to have you there.
Yeah. So one more thing that I wanted to kind of like get your thoughts on. I think you posted something on your Instagram story a while back. Where did I? Here it is. Speaking of music, the Beastie Boys put out this book, and super interesting. And I was really like intrigued by the photo that you posted, and I think once again it like sparked a conversation. You're just like so easy to like chat with. Like you'll like like you'll post something, and you're just like so open to like even carrying on the conversation. Like, oh yeah, like I love this. I highly recommend it. And so I ended up getting myself a copy. And as somebody who's a creative and, succeeding in pursuing that path where in some instances people might mean well and maybe like discourage someone from doing certain things that might seem like unconventional. I thought there was a really interesting account in here that Michael Diamond talked about. They say you should never meet your heroes. I don't know if I subscribe to that 100%. I feel like I'd rather be disappointed than have a cynical view of people. But I feel like it could be so heartbreaking if you have like admired and adored this person in like entertainment or music or whatever it is, and you're pursuing your dream, and then you meet them, and then you have this this interaction I've described here. So basically, I'll read it, and then we can go from there. Just as kind of like a way to encourage people who are maybe pursuing something that maybe half of their friends and family are telling them, no, don't do that. Like you got to go be an accountant or go like get your law degree. So he says, at one of our shows sometime around then, we were introduced to Danny Fields, a New York underground legend who had managed the Stooges and the Ramones. We idolized the Ramones, so I was really psyched to meet this guy. But when he opened his mouth, I was devastated. Kid, this will never work. You're white kids trying to rap? No one will like you. White people will be scared and black people will never accept you. So as Biggie Smalls said in Juicy, this album is dedicated to all the teachers that told me I'd never amount to anything. Or never amount to nothing. Should quote that accurately. Challenge accepted. We're going to get that bubble machine and we're going to rock the world.
That's everything.
Right? Yeah. So like, should someone allow an exchange like that to just like deflate them and say, like, oh, I guess I was wrong. Like I shouldn't pursue this at all. Like, like what does it take to kind of hear something like that and to pursue your passion anyway?
I think it kind of depends on what you're made of, to be honest, to put it kind of bluntly. Some people might hear that and it might just crush their spirit. But then you've got the other people who are going to hear that and be like, well, you know what? You can't tell me what to do. I'm going to do this thing. And it's a weird balance because sometimes people need to be told they can't do something to find the motivation to actually do that thing.
The ego gets involved a little bit sometimes.
I know, like personally, like if I had met someone with an idea, like I would never tell them, like unless it's like it's got to be like a really, really bad idea for me to say to anybody, don't do that. But in general, like I think the better path, of course, is to be an encourager. You can be constructive. You can say, hey, like that might not work so well doing it this way, but have you thought about doing it this way? Like I think that kind of approach is more fair.
Sometimes being an encourager, it's not one dimensional. It could involve giving someone something difficult to hear, but something that if they take to heart will actually really propel them.
But the fun thing about that quote is that they are the exact kind of people like you don't want to tell them they can't do anything because that's all that's going to do is give them the motivation. So it's weird because like if I'm sure they would have pursued their music anyway, but having someone so revered like say that to them probably gave them the fuel to want to prove them wrong, even like a hero.
And I guess they did prove them wrong.
Exactly.
So it's just interesting. Like I think we can draw a lot from those kind of accounts, even if we're not like professional musicians or in that particular field. It just has a lot of carryover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge you, Justin, just for taking the time to do this. I know you have a super busy schedule, so I was stoked when we had that chat at the Hippo Coffee Bar about potentially doing this. And I just appreciate you're just like a super gracious, like deep person. Like I remember we had like a conversation about Prince once, that just like
that was a
had
good
this
one.
like awesome conversation, just like super easy to talk to. So yeah, man, just keep being you, and I'm excited for what's next.
Thank you, Teddy, and
man.
thank you for providing voice for locals to just share their thoughts and talk with you about life and creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It goes both ways.
Yeah, man, thanks.
For sure.
Alrighty.
Thanks for tuning in. That does it for episode 5 of Local Perspectives. I want to thank Justin for being a part of this interview, and as always, I owe a big thank you to Bill Harker of HH Films for his filming and lighting expertise. He's truly one in a million, and I don't think I could do this without him. And thank you, friends, for your support and viewership. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. Till next time.